Maz? Hello?
Well, now I'm going to give the last reminder and let's see.
So again, my voice is clear, yeah?
I can hear it clear from my side.
Okay, good. We are done.
Clear, Saleh, don't worry.
COVID-19. Bye.
So let's wait for another few minutes. I think some of the people are just joining and entering.
Okay, so now anyone is hearing us now? Everyone is hearing? Elmaz? Everyone is hearing us or currently?
Yeah, currently right now we have 10 participants. We are waiting for, this is a 50%. We need another 10 because in total we have a different numbers of registered people. So just waiting for this. Well, this is a normal that I think a few people are being late now. And I think within the meeting, they will keep on joining. So also the video is right now recording. So after once we have finished this webinar, I am willing to join. I'm willing to share with the group, so they will be able to also review it after it. And so for now, I'd like to request everybody to turn off their microphones. Thank you. All right, I believe everybody is notified. I have shared a reminders in our Slack and in the Telegram group. So the rest of the people who are being late, I believe they will join a little later, and later on they will have a possibility to review this video again. All right, perhaps we can start it now. And then whoever who's gonna join, I'm gonna send them a videos. Yeah, so it's already 2 or 3. So as we have discussed earlier, we have a community where we have collectors and then the restaurant owners. Right now we have more than 1,000 restaurants around, 1,000 branches, 230 brands and around 204 restaurants. The community is growing on daily basis. So we are trying to exchange the opinions in the community, help each other during this tough period with this COVID-19 and then the crisis. And myself, I'm trying to, and I was doing several calls to the community just to ask if the community is helping them, if they have any ideas to propose, how we can improve ourselves and so on. So most of the time I heard common issues where all the restaurateurs are facing right now issues with the rent, with the landlords or the real estaters. So most of them were expecting from me to give them a legal advice or the next steps. So we started to investigate and talk to people who can involve people who can legally advise to the restaurateurs what to do next or what they can do. Sorry, Mr. Navid, can you turn off your microphone? I'll request everybody to turn off their microphones until the final part of the webinar. Nadir?
As a host, you can mute everybody.
Not going to fly with it. Probably has deeper pockets than I do that can deal with it. I don't know.
Can we have the host, everyone, please?
Also, I have
Yeah,
different-
I am requesting right now. So yeah, most of the issues that restaurants are facing, and then the common issues are related to the rent. So where the Mr. Martin Kubler has informed us that he has a connections with the lawyers who can really do a one webinar to make it clear for most of the restaurateurs to receive the help and receive the legal advices. So to everybody, I want to introduce Mr. Saleh and then Ms. Bianca. Both of them are from the legal side, who will be helping us today to get the answers for the questions that they filled up earlier. So few things that I want to tell is that first of all, thank you for joining. Thank you for the webinar and your time. This is a big help for the community, for us. Second, I would like to ask everybody to turn off their microphones until there will be a possibility. First, Mr. Saleh and Ms. Bianca will go through the questions that has been addressed earlier. And then after, we're gonna activate the Q&A, or you can text to the chats, or you can raise your hands and then be a speaker with the allowance of Mr. Saleh and Ms. Bianca. So if you can just shortly introduce yourself, and then we can go through the questions. Yeah, we can start it now.
Okay, you can go ahead, ladies first.
Thank you very much. Just to introduce myself, my name is Bianca Gracias. I'm co-founder of a cool legal consultancy called Suits and Advisors. Fun fact, we were named after the TV series Suits. We try to be like the Meghan Markles and Harvey Specters in the region and try and give our advice in a very cool manner that's easy to understand and easy to work with as well. Today we are here thanks to Almaz, and we hope to bring to you information that's in the normal legal language, which is easy for you to understand. And my colleague Saleh will also help if in case you have any questions from the Arabic language perspective. So over to you, Saleh.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you everyone for attending with us today. My name is Saleh Al-Ubaidli. I'm a licensed advocate in the UAE before all UAE courts, including the High Court and the Dubai Cassation Court, Abu Dhabi Cassation Court, as well as the IFC Court. I'm a former legal advisor for the Dubai Land Department and have worked for several years with some of the largest law firms in Dubai. And currently, I'm the managing partner of Saleh Al-Ubaidli & Co. Advocates and Legal Consultants. We are specialized in real estate and commercial. And I'm delighted to be today speaking to the restaurants communities. I'm a foodie by nature, so hopefully this will add something. Not really in Ramadan, but we will try to do our best. So Bianca, back to you, just to give a few points overview, and then I will take it from there.
Saleh, do you want to try using your headphones? Because some participants are saying that it's not very clear.
Okay. I'll try.
Try with the headphones.
You go ahead anyway.
Okay. So I'm just going to set a general perspective in terms of what the law is right now. Yes, we've been hit, unfortunately or fortunately, with the COVID-19 situation right now, and we are in this position. So what are the rules and regulations that have been set forth? With respect to force majeure, has the government declared force majeure? No, the government has not actively declared force majeure as of now. However, restaurants being shut or salons or gyms being shut due to acts of government, that can be construed as an act of force majeure under your particular contracts. However, it really depends what you're trying to claim under the contract, whether you're trying to get out of the contract or you're trying to get the other party to actually enforce the terms of the contract. Second thing we want to highlight to you is that there are no rent regulations released in this period of COVID-19 by any of the 7 Emirates, which means it is largely left to the interpretation of what contracts you have in place and the UAE Civil Code for that matter. And the third thing that we'd like to highlight as a landscape discussion for the purposes of this web talk is that we encourage you not to rely on any newspaper announcements, because the newspapers announce a lot of things. They only become law or regulation when they're actually published on a ministry's website or in the official gazette. So as lawyers, we only refer to a law when it's actually published in the official gazette. My colleague Saleh is now going to take you through a few provisions of the UAE Civil Code that you should probably be aware of, and also talk to you a little bit about the courts, how they're dealing with the various issues in terms of practice right now. So over to you, Saleh.
Thank you again. So just please write on the group chat if my voice is clearer or not. How you see the voice, Almaz or Bianca?
From my side, I hear it clear, better than the previous one. Still, I hear a little echo, but I think it's because of the space that you have around. But
yes,
I hear it better than previous.
It's maybe hold the microphone like this closer to your mouth.
Okay.
On the other side, Saleh. The microphone. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So now the voice, hopefully Mr. Mazen can hear us better. So yes, regarding the current pandemic or coronavirus issue, as you know, this is something unprecedented in the past. So governments and everyone is trying to do his best or their best to safeguard the community in general and the economy, and before this also the importance of the health of the people. So there are 3 elements you should consider before you take any action, or you should consider straight away now to understand your position. First is the rent regulation. As Bianca stated, there is no amendment or new rent provisions or regulation in relation to the current crisis. Second, because each Emirates has their own specific rental regulation. So that's why you need to look at it specifically, depends on which Emirate you are located. Maybe Almaz can also advise us later if we have only restaurants from Dubai or from the whole UAE also, so we can address it proper. Okay, I understand the whole UAE. So this takes us to the second element. The second element, there are some general provision in the UAE Civil Code. Those provisions together may assist.
You don't get it. What business is it of yours? What?
What's happening?
Oh, sure. Stand back, Tom. I'll get you some answers.
Okay. Shall I continue or?
Haji Al Hakim, you are the host. Can you please mute everybody?
God damn it, tell us who did.
Give me a second. Let me request to make me a host so I can mute everybody.
Okay, I'm back. It's normal. Okay, good. Okay, hopefully there was no emergency situation, just we were hearing. I don't know what's going on. Okay, let's continue. So the second element is there are some provision in the UAE Civil Code that together may assist the tenant or the owner of a restaurant to seek a better treatment whether in negotiating with the landlord or whether through the court or the rental dispute committees. And we will come to those provisions later on. Third, and the most important, is your lease agreement. Because as also Bianca stated, the lease agreement, if it has, for example, if it contains a provision about the force majeure, this might help you or make it easier to argue or to convince the court that the current situation related specifically to your situation is a force majeure where your obligation can be suspended or where you can claim the reduction of the rent or the waiver of the rent during the closure period or overall reduction for the remaining period of the rent. So this is number one. Also, I would like to give some practical point just to keep everyone also comfortable about bounce check and being sued at the rental dispute committee. There is no, again, there's no new amendment to the regulation that bounce check is, for example, is no longer exist or suspended, but the government have given instruction to the authorities that not to accept nowadays any bounce check complaint and also any rent dispute in relation to non-payment of the rent. So this is just to allow everyone to have a time to negotiate with their landlord, to see how the crisis is going forward, if things will be open much more after Ramadan. So this is the situation in terms of practicality. So also there are two questions, Almaz, if you want me to address them, because it was very commonly asked. I'll just read the question if you allow me.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, the first question was about someone was asking a question about during this crisis if the contract was before it come to an end, before the expiry date of the contract, both parties were, for example, negotiating whether to renew or not renew, and any agreement has been put in place, but the tenant has kept staying in the, for example, in the shop or the place, and no agreement has been concluded. He was asking whether I still can go out of my lease or not. This question has a very clear answer as per the law. So the law says if the tenant continue to occupy the property after the expiry of the contract period without any objection by the landlord, then the contract shall be renewed for a similar period or for 1 year, whichever is less. So if your previous contract was for 3 years, your contract will be renewed for 1 year, not 3 years, with the same terms and conditions. So unless you reach an agreement or unless you decide not to renew the contract, if you stay, the contract will be considered renewed. There was also another question more related to the current pandemic, which is about if the tenant has the right, which is the most obvious question these days, if the tenant has the right to ask for a waiver for the current period where shops are closed or a reduction of rent. Again, my voice is clear? Yes?
Yes, I can hear you. It is a bit echo that we can hear, but
okay. Okay, so let's continue. So again, there is no amendment to the law, or there is no declaration from the state that current situation is a force majeure. However, this is one point. The other point also I want to mention, there are so many announcements, sometimes in the media or sometimes even from the landlord themselves, that we are going to support our tenants, we are going to inject X amount of money, we are going to help our tenant. This is all together doesn't constitute any legal situation. However, if we go back to the couple of provision in the UAE Civil Code, namely Article 249 and also Article 273, we can argue, and also depends on your contract, we might be able to argue before the Rent Dispute Committee that while there is a decision from the government to close the shop, this can be considered as a force majeure because I am completely shut down and I'm completely not in a position to fulfill any of my obligation. So that period should be waived from the contract because of this situation. And of course, this is an argument to be made clearly before the court or before the Rent Dispute Committee. And their decision, they have the discretion actually, as per those provision, they might allow, for example, for a rent reduction or for a waiver or to rebalance the contract again if the contract was, for example, more not really matching the current economic situation in terms of the value of the rent or in terms of any other strict obligation against the tenants. So this is the second question. Maybe Almaz, yes.
Saleh, I just want to add one thing to what you said, just clarification, if I may, please. The clarification that I want to make is you need to remember that real estate laws are different in each emirate. That's very important for you to understand. That includes rental laws. The rental law that Saleh mentioned earlier relates to Dubai. If you have a clarification on any other emirate, I'd request you to save it for later and then we can address it later specifically. But in terms of the civil code, that is federal. So that is applicable throughout the country. That's just a clarification I wanted to make. Sorry, Saleh.
So those are the two questions I have from previously that was forwarded to us. And Almaz may now you give the floor the possibility to ask questions, and maybe we can take the questions from the audience.
Yeah, I've seen the first one who raised the hand is Mr. Mazen. Yeah.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Saleh. Thank you everyone for the a couple of clarifying questions, and Saleh, I think you hit all my topics of the questions that I had, but some specifics, please. So in the case where there's a contract that is expiring or it has expired, and like you said, we're in negotiations. But so I understand that if we stay,
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
Almaz, can you mute? Thank you. So if we stay in the shop, it can be renewed automatically. But what happens if we stay in the shop, but then want to exit, right? So now I have a shop, for example, the landlord has not responded to my requests to reduce the rent. By the time they come back to me, if they don't come back to me with something that is acceptable, that I can operate with, would I be able to exit the shop? Right now I'm operating on an expired lease, if that makes sense. Yeah, and by the time they respond, I don't know, maybe another week, 2 weeks, if what they respond with is not acceptable, and I want to vacate the shop, do I have any liability? Saleh, can you hear it?
Yes, yes. See, hello? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean the time is crucial when you decide to renew or not to renew. So it's all by way of legal notice. So if you serve the legal notice properly as per the regulation during the specific time before the end of the contract, then your contract will be renewed as per the notice if there was an agreement. But if there was no agreement, if your notice was not to renew, then your contract will, by the natural end of the contract, as per the date in the contract, it will come to an end. If you stay and the contract as per the law, if you continue to occupy and the contract becomes renewed, then you decided to leave. This means that you decided to terminate a contract that exists, correct? So here again, depends on the contract, whether you have the right to terminate before the natural expiry of the contract or not. However, as I stated at the beginning, today we are experiencing an unprecedented situation where, because of this situation, we don't have a jurisprudence or a court precedent on the past about a similar situation. So with those provisions from the civil code, because the rent dispute regulation, most of them doesn't refer to the area of the force majeure or to the area where the contract is impossible to be executed by the tenant. So based on those general provisions in the federal law, you may argue that because things are moving, actually the situation are changing on daily basis, as you can see. So last month is different from this month, is different from June or Jan or February this year. So with those provision, you may request the RDC, the Rental Dispute Committee, to terminate the contract without damages or without compensation to the landlord due to the current situation. But again, what would the landlord respond to this? Also, it may shape or reshape the decision of the court. I hope it's...
Yes, so it's very good. I mean, obviously, it's a like you said, the new situation, we don't have a lot of precedence on it, so that we're all trying to navigate. I think the last example you gave is the most important one for all of us, is in situations where we need to exit an existing lease because of the whole COVID situation, that we cannot continue. Can we terminate without penalty, right? Which is the big challenge that we're all facing.
Here I would like also again to mention Article 273 from the Civil Code and 249 from the Article 249 from the Civil Code and 782 from the Civil Code also. So in a very brief and simple way, what those articles says, it allows the contracting party to argue before the judge that the existence of the existing contract is not really balancing the position of both parties, and requesting the judge to rebalance this relationship due to the current circumstances of COVID-19. And also Article 782 Civil Code provides that if it becomes impossible for the tenant to have a full or partial enjoyment of the leased property, they can request the direct termination of this contract. But again, those provisions are general. So we need to apply them to our specific rental issues, because those provisions are from the Civil Code and not the rental regulations. But those the provisions that may help the tenants these days.
Thank you very much. That's very important. Just last confirmation, you said the government has given instruction not to accept bounce check and rental disputes. Is that announced somewhere, or is that just an internal communication?
No, this is from our experience. We understand from police stations, from the authority, from the prosecution, that currently they will not move forward with any claim from the beneficiary, for example. However, this may not be the situation in the future or the near future. So maybe the same check that is bounced today, the beneficiary may open the case after a few months, which can be accepted. So still, for currently, it's not allowed, practically.
Thank you, Saleh.
Does anybody have any other questions? I've seen the last Mr. Naveed say that can we use Civil Code 273 to exit due to coronavirus or the force majeure?
I think I was just highlighting this. So to exit or to argue before the applicable authority today that the current situation is a force majeure, you need to rely on those provisions in the civil code. You need to rely on your contract. If contract has reference to a force majeure clause, and you need to you need also to refer to the current situation. And let me add one very important aspect here. The court, in general, they rule over the cases on case-by-case basis. So even if there is a clear regulation, each case may have a different situation. So to prove the damages that you are suffering these days is also a crucial element before those authority. So you need, for example, to show any financial positions you have, a third-party expert report that shows how much you are suffering these days. This is all an important element.
I also want to add, Saleh, to what you're saying with regards to 273. That's a very valid point that you made, that everything needs to be taken into account, and the courts do look at these on a case-by-case basis. And although Article 273 provides that if obligations cannot be performed, the contract can be automatically suspended, I also want to draw everyone's attention to another article in the Civil Code, which is Article 246. And Article 246 requires you to perform all actions under your contract in good faith. So you can't just automatically breach the contract because somebody else has breached it, or try and terminate a contract under Article 273 on the basis that it allows automatic termination. So everything has to be taken into account, and you have to make sure that you're in a position that you're acting in good faith. Another very important clause, article actually in the Civil Code that comes to mind is Article 287, which basically states that if a person can prove that a loss arose out of an extraneous cause, a cause that is beyond his control, then he's not liable to make good that cause, that the loss that is suffered during this. So if anybody makes a claim against you for monies that you have lost, and you've lost those monies for causes beyond your control, then I would request you to have a look at 287. Again, like Saleh said, you can't just look at this unilaterally. You have to take into account various other provisions, but it's something that you can keep in mind as well.
Thank you. Mr. Alawi, I've seen your hand.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Saleh, and to everyone. First, I'd like to thank Bianca and Saleh for taking time, obviously, to answering these questions and helping out in any way and in any form with us restaurant owners. So be it me, myself, I'm a UAE national, but unfortunately stuck abroad. And I have to send several emails to several landlords because I've got several brands around the UAE, and at times we do not involve our own lawyers into such cases. But what I'd like to say, I wouldn't like to explain my position because I'm in the same position which I think Mazen was asking. And I think Saleh, you've answered a lot of these questions, and I think it all goes down to, and correct me if I'm wrong, case by case and contract by contract. which is something like my own brands. I've got 6 landlords currently. 5 of them have given us rent waivers, which we're very happy. One of them we've been negotiating since March 15th. They are a fund group, which is probably one of the reasons why they're not giving us a rent waiver. And we clearly have been affected. 70%, I would say, of our sales has been affected. 99% of walk-ins. We had no walk-in in April because of the lockdown. But what I would just like to say, I wouldn't like to ask the questions because I think you've answered most of it, but probably if we could share, or maybe Almaz, you could share numbers or of the offices of Saleh or Bianca, and we could maybe approach, because I think this is very time sensitive. And for example, for me, which maybe I've shot the button where I've already given them my termination, and probably I shot myself in the foot. So probably if we do have lawyers who understand commercials, and especially like Saleh has said, he's a foodie himself, it will be an added advantage, because my own lawyers are not very well equipped with commercials. So it will be an extra help, and probably we could go directly and just and appoint or get our case heard, and we take it forward from there. This is just personally, probably after the meeting, Almas, if you could share it, it would be helpful.
I'm sorry, I think Saleh just got kicked out of the meeting by mistake.
Sure, the link remains the same. He can, I think, re-enter just by simply clicking on the link. Let's wait for Mr. Saleh. And also, Ms. Walawi, thank you for your time to attend the webinar. All the contact details of Ms. Bianca and Mr. Saleh will be shared as soon as the webinar will be completed. And also, let me give the let me message to Mr. Saleh to rejoin it again.
Bianca, are you and Saleh part of the same firm?
No, actually, Saleh is a colleague, and I know him from when we worked at Hadif and Partners. And since then, we've just stayed so connected because we work on a lot of matters together. And in this particular scenario, we're working with a lot of business owners in particular to negotiate with their landlords to bring rent prices down or find alternative means of relief. Therefore, and we're trying to work on these ventures where we give out as much as information as we can to business owners, because as you know, in the UAE, fortunately or unfortunately, information is so scarce. So I was just saying to Almaz that we are happy to come here and share as much as information as we have from a generic perspective, if it can help in any way. So you're very welcome to ask any questions that you may have.
If I may, just while we're waiting for Saleh to rejoin, can you give us an idea of the legal costs? I mean, I know every case is different and all of that, but I've personally had some very negative experiences utilizing lawyers in rental disputes in the UAE, where I would have been better off trying to do it myself, right? But you know, this situation today is very different and is very difficult. It would be really important for us, because as Alawi shared, I mean, we're all impacted, lost 70, 80, 90% of our revenue. So we don't have the cash to pay the landlord or the lawyers, right? So we really need to understand, okay, if I'm gonna try to get out of a negative situation with a landlord to terminate the lease, right? How much is it gonna cost me in legal fees? Is that gonna be more or less than my slide? So any kind of would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to tell you is, the first thing I want to say, Mazen, is that Saleh and I think very differently. We're commercial-minded lawyers, so we do understand when clients come to us and they want advice. We're happy to share our time, give you an initial consultation just to give you an idea on options that you may have. But then again, when you talk about legal costs, it really depends whether you want us just to negotiate with a landlord, help you with settlement, or get you out of a pickle. Because a lot of business owners get themselves into pickle and then they come to the lawyers. So I always say, come to a lawyer first, because you may be lucky and get free advice. rather than having to come, later on when you've got yourself into a mess and then we have to get you out. And that's when it becomes expensive, when you've got bounce checks, when you've got cases against you. So I would say that the price would vary, but if you can fix a scope of work with your lawyer, whoever your lawyer is, you can always fix fees as well. So as long as a lawyer has a good idea of what the work is involved, and Saleh, please feel free to chip in as well. We've worked, our firm has worked on fixed fees, and I've worked with Saleh on several transactions. As long as we can, figure out what your scope of work is. We also have clients who come to us and say, for example, they're trying to fight for 100,000 dirhams, but it's going to cost them 150 or 200 just in legal fees, court fees, translation fees. We advise them to settle independently rather than coming through lawyers. It may not be commercially, cost effective. So we try and do a consultation upfront with you and see what are the cost implications before we actually take you down a rabbit hole.
Thank you, Bianca.
Sure. I can see Mr. Shajir, you raised the hand.
Yes. Hi, Bianca and Saleh. Thank you for sharing a lot of your insights. Very similar to one of our other friend who just shared his experience. I have two properties that I have already served the notice because it's in a mall with the mad self-system. And one of the property I had just leased in January. I did not even do any fit out. And I had a discussion with the mall. In fact, back in the first week of February, so when I saw the pandemic, the crisis, developing into a pandemic, I asked them to help me get out of the contract because by then the problems were emerging in Italy and Iran and all those places. And they said no, nothing is going to happen. So I was basically asking them to either walk out of the contract or give us some extension so that we wait and see. Anyway, here we are now, and we consulted a lawyer, and based on the advice, we have actually terminated the contract under the force majeure. Although our contract lease agreement does not have any force majeure provisions, but the lawyer advised that it is part of the civil law, so we can quote that, and it is in substance this is a force majeure. But anyway, the mall management replied saying they don't accept this as a force majeure, and we ought to continue obligations under our lease contract. But we have replied to them saying, we have served the notice on 9th April, and we stand by that, and we are unable to fulfill our obligations because we need the fund to continue operating, and the banks are, holding back the funding. All our restaurants, we operate 6 restaurants, and all our restaurants are shut, and hardly any revenue to meet the existing obligations itself. So, I'm sure many of us are in a very similar situation, actually. Our biggest problem is obviously the post-dated checks that we have given to the landlords, because these post-dated checks, if they are not honored, then it becomes a criminal case. We are talking mostly about the civil case, but there is a criminal aspect to it when we talk about the check bounce. You said such issues are, such cases are put on hold, but there will be a time made, because they are slowly opening up everything, when we'll have to start dealing with that. So, what do you have any idea how they're going to handle these cases? Because it's not going to be 1 or 2 or 100; it will be probably tens of thousands. So, obviously, it will be inundating the judicial system we have in this country. So, do you see any movement from the government, at least on a compassionate ground? Because most people in this country do business in good faith, and what is currently happening is beyond anybody's control.
So what's the question exactly? Sorry, if I may ask you again to ask very specifically.
Yeah, see, there are a lot of disputes, like, we have terminated some contracts, and those landlords have our checks posted with checks in hand. And then we have other contracts, lease contracts, where we are trying to negotiate the rent because we want to keep those properties, having invested millions. But the landlords are not willing to negotiate. Some are saying we'll give you 1 month grace towards the end of the contract period and all that, which is not practical. And most of us are not in a position to honor the rentals that we agreed prior to this pandemic. So even if we want to pay the landlords, most of us are not in a position to honor those checks, and so that will eventually lead to bounce checks. So what most of us are going to find ourselves in the next coming months is all of us may have a few checks bounce, and the prospect of facing criminal charges. There is a civil aspect to it that is separately, but the criminal charges. So
okay. See, the situation is a global. I mean, the current issue in the UAE, it's not related to UAE. It's related to the entire world, and I believe other countries may suffering even worse than. So the situation is evolving actually on daily basis. So for the moment, no bounce check will be accepted for the moment. This moment, how long will last? A month, 2 months, more or less? We just need to follow up. But so it's not possible for me as a lawyer to advise you what would be the situation in 6 months' time, unless there is an amendment or there is an urgent regulation that the government will pass. Otherwise, it's not predictable to decide about the future. But I believe in general, because I agree with you, the number of bounce check will be crazy. So the government will not will definitely make a special instruction related to those bounce check, because currently, even for the criminal, even before coronavirus, as some of you may aware, even the criminal court have taken much less severe approach towards bounce check, and fine were most of the sanction instead of jail, for example, unlike the past. And now there is a serious discussion within the government to remove the criminal element of the bounce check and only keep it as a civil. But this is something that will stay as it is until there is a new regulation.
I just want to add to the bounce check element, and Saleh, I think it would be great if you can clarify also how the police are dealing with it. But in early 2018, they decriminalized checks that had minor amounts, less than 100,000. So I believe that in practicality, if there is a check that has bounced and it's a less than 100,000 dirhams, if you are presented before the public prosecutor who now, or who used to before the corona time sit at the police station, you are presented before the public prosecutor, you're made to stand in a line, and they just give you a fine and you're let go. And,
yes,
and then and the other
within
party,
the same day. Within
yes,
the same day, yes.
At the most, you'd spend a night in jail. That's your worst case scenario with checks. And I believe that's still the case with amounts less than 100,000.
Yes. Maybe Mazen have a question.
Is that the same in all the Emirates? Because I believe that decriminalization of amounts less than 100,000, or I heard somewhere it is 200,000, is only applicable in Dubai. Is that the case, or is it across all Emirates?
Yeah. Again, this is part of the complexity we have here in the UAE. Yes, you need to double check each Emirates because the situation might be different from Emirates to another Emirates. But what we can see that whatever decision made, for example, in Abu Dhabi about giving relief or something for the investors or the community, then the other Emirates one by one following the same approach, more or less.
Okay. So it takes precedence from other judgments, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So also one more point. Today, yes, for example, you are a tenant and you are not able to pay the rent. So in the normal situation, the landlord will take you to the rental dispute committee. And if your check is bounced, he will take a criminal action against you. So currently, the landlord has no power to do these two things. So I'm just trying to find some positivity. I know the situation is very negative and all of us actually are affected. All layers, different levels are affected, no exception. But so today you might, depends on your business, of course, whether you will do delivery or other things. I'm close to the food and beverage, but anyway, it's not easy. So you are still today allowed to operate to a certain extent in some areas, and things will be more moving more after Ramadan, while the landlord still cannot, for example, evacuate you from the leased property or take a criminal action against you. So this should somehow allow you to breathe and take some steps forward. Do we have anyone from Abu Dhabi? Because there are some good news from Abu Dhabi. So let's bring some good news. Anyone have a restaurant in Abu Dhabi or a coffee shop? Anyway, the general then, maybe you know someone that have a restaurant or coffee shop there. The government made a decision, a proper official decision, to refund 20% of the lease amount for 2020 for any restaurant whatsoever, from a very small cafeteria to a very fancy fine dining restaurant. So a refund of 20% of your lease agreement only in Abu Dhabi. So hopefully, this decision is very recent, just last few days. So hopefully we can see something similar in other Emirates.
That's a very kind gesture from the government of Abu Dhabi, we must say. And no matter how small or big the amount is, actually what matters is actually the gesture, the message that the government is trying to send.
So in that sense, it's well appreciated what the government is doing in Abu Dhabi. Let's hope the rest of the Emirates also follow the suit.
Right. I also can see Mr. Niyati Patel raise the hand.
Oh, well, that's Miss Niyati Patel.
Oh, right. Apologize for this.
No
Great.
problem.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as we are running short of time, I will quickly dive into my question, and I'm really grateful for all the discussions and the answers that have come from Bianca and Mr. Saleh. My question is that because government is trying to contain coronavirus, so the footfall of the malls, because I have a restaurant in a mall, so the footfall itself is restricted to 30%. The parkings are closed 75%. So in this situation, my turnover by default is supposed to go down because there is no customer in the food court. It's lying empty. Despite there is 30% capacity of the mall, people are just not coming out. Well, that's a different thing. But as a matter of fact, the capacity of the malls and the food courts is 30%. So how when we say the rent is the operational cost. It's not my capital investment. So when itself, the customers, let's say maximum would be 30%, and out of those 30%, I would be converting maybe 10% or 20% of that 30%. So in all our lease agreements, there is a clause that when the amount that we are supposed to pay the rent for exceeds that 15%, then we are supposed to pay the higher side of the rent. So when in a situation like this, can we not offer the landlords to pay the turnover rent as a revenue share? Because if we agree in the lease agreements, I know it leads to a lot of complications in terms of modifying the agreement itself. But when we agree to pay a higher side of the rent, when we do more than that 15% of the amount, why can't we offer the same now?
The question is clear. It's clear and it's very relevant to the current situation. I'll just answer quickly. This is, first of all, it depends on your contract. I've seen those contracts that you have to pay a rent plus a percentage if the sales exceed a certain amount. So you are saying why with this current situation, which is the way around, to pay only pay share of the percentage of the sales. Doesn't matter how much the sales. Of course, this have to be your contract should say this, and I'm sure your contract doesn't say this. So you need to negotiate with your landlord. On the other hand, this also the reduction of the capacity of the mall up to 30%, where in reality even there's no 30% because most people they're home. I understand this. So this is a similar situation from a legal perspective to the situation of closing. So because at the end, it's all about the damage. For example, if you are closed and you have zero damage, then you cannot claim anything. But if you're suffering a damage, whether because of 100% closed, whether for reduction or a capacity of a maximum of 30%, so this is the elements of your case that you need to bring together. One, to negotiate with landlord, and second, alternatively, to take a legal action. So this is also the facts that you need to argue as per the provision of the civil code that we have stated earlier, that today you are in a position because of this capacity of the 30%, this is a force majeure, for example. So it's similar situation. And actually, I will add something. Opening 30%, as most of you are aware, might be more damaging than closing 100%, correct? So because you are operating extra you're having an extra operation cost. So this is what I have seen also, that restaurants owner are arguing with the mall, either we open fully or we don't open. Mr. Mazen.
Just another point for your information. We also have a situation where we stayed open during the lockdown for delivery only. And some of the mall landlords, when they came back with their relief packages, they basically said that if you are open in any capacity during that period, you get zero relief, right? So it's a double penalty. So we opened, obviously capacity is very reduced. We're making maybe 100-200 dirhams a day sales and delivery, but we kept it open for whatever reason. Now it's a double penalty, and we need help in figuring out how to challenge that, to say, if we had closed and made their mall more dead, right, it would have been better for us.
Yeah. Okay, here also let me add a very recent experience we had also with one of the community mall belong to one of the major mall in the UAE. And this is something you have to also do if you are in a similar situation. First of all, make everything properly documented. This is very important to help you in your case in the future, in case you will have a case. Second, we have a client who seeked us just last week because they received instruction from the mall. It's a community mall, small community mall, to start opening in Ramadan. and it was 24-hour notice. So, and also to close at 9 o'clock, not even at 10, because they need to reach by 9. And because it is a coffee shop where the concept of the coffee shop, it's not a delivery concept. And second, it doesn't like sell, for example, a whole cake or things that you can sell during the day in Ramadan. So practically they will open from 7 till 9, only 2 hours. And that community mall situated also in a local residence where no one will leave home before 8, the minimum, because of the iftar. So we send that mall a proper legal notice telling that your instruction has no economic sense whatsoever. And we made our decision that we are not opening and you cannot force us to open. And we are still insisting to get a waiver of the rent during this period, because I can't say this is actually one of the malls belong to MAF, because MAF, they have announced that they will give a waiver or suspend the rent during the closing period. So they were also pushing to open, so they don't need to suspend the rent. Okay, can I say something also, because it's already 3 o'clock, but because I've seen question at the end. Someone was asking, because of my check was bounced for the rent, the landlord was, for example, closing my exhaust or doing things to my shop. This is illegal action by the landlord, and you can immediately file a complaint even before the RDC, and in some situation can be through the police station.
Mr. Saleh, just one more clarification about the point we were talking earlier. You said if there is a bounce check, the beneficiary first has to go to RDC, and in a case like today, RDC is closed. Can the beneficiary not file a complaint directly with the police or the public prosecutor because it's a criminal case?
No, they can. I mean, no, I didn't say only to the RDC. If you have a bounce check related to a payment of rent, the landlord have the 2 directions to go parallel, RDC and the criminal. And today, both ways are closed.
So even the police or public prosecution is not accepting any bounce check complaint.
Yes.
And one more thing, when you have a long-term contracts, like one of the contracts I have, we terminated with around 13 months in the contract remaining. It's in a mall, and so none of the mall's contracts have an exit clause. But if things don't work out, they ask you to pay the full amount, and you are not in a position to do that, because the first reason that you're exiting from that place is actually because things are. So what is if this reaches a court, rental dispute committee, I'm talking about Dubai and Sharjah, what is the maximum penalty the court has given in the past? I'm talking from a experience point, a practice point of view, rather than a law. What is the maximum they would ask a tenant to pay to the landlord as a compensation? Thank you.
Sorry, there was some noise. What was the issue? So to take it to the RDC?
No, what I was saying is actually, if I have a long-term contract, which I have another, let's say, 2 years to finish the contract, and I'm unable to operate that particular business or restaurant because of the current situation. If I keep that place open, I have to pay the utility, salary, and everything. So my decision is actually to close down because I don't have the money to meet my expenses. So in order to close down, I send a notice of termination to the landlord, but he's insisting, since I have a contract remaining for another 2 years, I better pay the remaining 2 years rent. If not, he will present the check and he will make a case. So if we go to a dispute, let's say
Yes,
a rental dispute committee, what will be the maximum penalty or compensation the tenant have to pay to the court?
Yes, it's clear. Here where you have to, here it's different from Emirates to another Emirates. And here where the rent dispute or the rent regulations regulate this aspect. And I can tell you there is differences between Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, and so on. So it depends on which Emirates. For example, in Abu Dhabi, no matter how long the lease is for, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the committee will not order the entire remaining amount of the lease. They will just evaluate a decent or rightful compensation for the landlord. And in Abu Dhabi, it can be around 3 to 4 month payment of rent. But again, this is different from Emirates to another Emirates. Okay, Almaz. Maybe Bianca want to conclude with something.
Yeah, I believe we're running out of the time, and
I think you've encapsulated everything, Saleh. And over to you, Almaz.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who has joined the webinar. I believe it was helpful and useful for all of us. Special thanks for you, Ms. Bianca, and for you, Mr. Saleh, for the patience and then the replies that you have provided to all of us. The session is recorded, so I'll be more than happy to share it with the community. And also, I will share your details with your permission to all the community. So in case of anything, they will be able to email you or they contact you directly to discuss the certain cases that, that every member has. Then from my side, also we as a community, we are willing to arrange another webinars. Ms. Bianca proposed that perhaps on a monthly basis, we can make one webinar a month where we can discuss a certain topic. As today we have discussed a rent related questions. Maybe next time we can go for the labor or something else. We will find out this with the poll questions, and then I'll send you an email. Mr. Martin, thank you for contacting all of us and combining us in one email so we could arrange this webinar. I think around 26 people have watched, and I believe almost all the people asked. I was also about to ask this question regarding the ex-host blocking and everything that you have replied, Mr. Saleh. So from my side, that is it. Thank you one more time for your time, being in the webinar and being the person who is replying for the questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We were delighted to speak to you today. And if anyone have any specific question, we are happy to receive those questions specifically on our emails, and we will address them properly. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bianca. Thank you, Mr. Saleh.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day all.